Um, Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can we please have some order at the back? Cela nje inzolo. Thank you very much. My name is Bundu Siyakuzukisa Mnyaka, uZikhalo Mbizano George Tia Kusolo Bendonga. Okanye ke uGeorge obanye xa bemazi. I am going to be facilitating this first session and also just to do a brief opening and welcoming, because the gist of the day is the Imbadu session that we're going to be having. So I would like to firstly greet my colleagues from the Madibaz Youth Lab and greet the members of the University Management and STEM share through the Dean, and as well as the panelists and the facilitator and students of Claude Kavane, of Charlotte Maklege and Hector Peterson and the rest of the Nelson Mandela University students at large. So we've got this series that is going around campus to campus. It's called Imbadu. So the concept of the word Imbadu is derived from isiXhoseni, which is a space that allows for sharing of ideas and views and engagement that is non-threatening, but rather it seeks to ensure growth and engagement and issues discussed from a local, national, and global discourse. In its core meaning, Imbadu is a space that promotes the values of Ubuntu, diversity, social justice, and equality. This Imbadu session aims to discuss a developmental society that always promotes fruitful engagements that are at the cutting edge of innovation to transform the society to the best of its ability to thrive. While the nature of engagement tends to be polarized given diversity of ideas, coupled with intolerance and degenerating into chaos. Engagements prove as a platform, engagements provide a platform to become an informed society at all material times. In this regard, an informed society is one where citizens are empowered to express themselves to build a culture of transformative engagements and where development is aimed at the center of this priority. So the focus of this Imbadu session today is to reimagine quality, realistic, and impactful engagements. With that being said, I'm just going to give 2 to 3 minutes to the SRC president to give a message of support, and then we'll take it from there. President.
Amantla. Thank you very much, Program Director. My name still remains Bonso Long. Of course, I was attending as a normal student here. Just got hijacked, you know. I think you'll forgive my unorganized thoughts. But nonetheless, I believe that as I'm attending here, of course, I must also give a message of support on behalf of the SRC, you know, which I believe that is the body that is representing the students and the primary stakeholders of this university. Of course, we are called here, and we must first and foremost acknowledge this program for the duty that is doing for the Nelson Mandela University, because we believe that learning does not happen in the classrooms only. In fact, that the learning that happens in the classroom is the learning that, of course, supposed, you know, to be supplemented by learning that happens outside of the classroom, because now you are not confined to the terms and conditions of the textbooks, because now you have, you know, your robust engagements outside of the classrooms. Because if you do have those robust engagements with your lecturers, I can tell you now that is the beginning of your perpetual failure, because there are lecturers who never went through this kind of engagement, who does not appreciate, robust engagement. They feel threatened by students, having robust engagement with them. So I want to believe that we need more of this program so that the type of academics that we are going to produce from Nelson Mandela University are therefore able to acknowledge robust engagements, which will therefore be able to assist us in terms of transforming the society that we live in. Because our lecturers, even themselves, they are taught, or the professors that we have, the engagements that I must acknowledge this, because I want to believe that it is not something that is happening simply because one wishes to graduate, in terms of getting their own degrees and what so on. This is an engagement that is honest in its form, because one who therefore writes academic papers for the sake of producing academic papers, they are not necessarily honest, because these comrades, they speak about the issues of decolonization in terms of, for the sake of publishing it. They are not practicing what they actually write in these academic papers. I can tell you, you have too many professors who wrote about the issues of decolonization, but they don't live up to those standards of decolonization. They are the very same professors who still, feed us with these liberal textures, instead of ensuring that we do question, the text that we get from the classroom. But nonetheless, I must acknowledge, Program Director, the program that you are giving us, which is Reimagining Quality and Realistic Impact and Impactful Engagements, which I believe that as students of Nelson Mandela University, we must, be able to engage in quality engagements and be realistic in our approach, and also have impactful engagements which will ultimately ensure that we transform our own societies. We are able to leave Nelson Mandela University and go back to our communities and ensure that the village that I come from, I'm able to provide solutions instead of thinking that the problems that we experience in our societies are necessarily the problems that one would ordinarily experience there, but they end there. As a graduate, you must go and be able to ensure that you are able to solve the problems in your own communities. Our research that we do must be able to ensure that they resolve the problems that we have, not necessarily to graduate and become a doctor who graduated in Nelson Mandela. Of course, we understand that as you write your research, your aim is to ensure that you contribute towards the formation of a new knowledge, but it must be something that, of course, it's truthful. I don't want to speak long. I see the program directors now beginning to shift, But I want to believe, my apologies, I should have started by greeting, our speakers. But I said, since that, they hijacked me, you must forgive my unorganized thoughts. So I'm going to do, that is part of decolonization. Now I begin at the end. I don't want to start at the beginning. So I would like to also greet the leadership of, we used to politics, now I'm calling leadership now. Away to Fechela. I want to also greet Comrade Tabo. I must not say to leadership and say that, Mr. Tabo Shingani, you remain a comrade. You must not abandon the struggle of black students in general. And also, Itumeleng Mtlavane, greetings, and all the students of Nelson Mandela. So, of course, that's how we do it. We do not conform to the norms and standards in terms of the engagements. We start and we finish at the beginning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, President. For someone who said that they were hijacked, you were surely prepared. But I guess that comes with being a leader. With that being said, just to briefly say that, as the President was saying, that there's many of these engagements. Before I get butchered by my own team, if you look at the program, there's some that are going to be on the 24th, that will move to the 26th, just an apology there. On the 24th, there will be a discussion, an Imbadu session here at the, is it here? Yeah, it's here. At the conference center. That will be celebrating the 100 years of Julius Nyerere. Please do come and join us on the 24th. It should be coming out on Communique as latest as Tuesday, I would like to think. With that being said, my part here ends here for now. I want to invite, I call him Max Gemage. It's written on the program, Amandla Didiz. I don't know whether there's a relation with the minister or not, I don't know. But that's for another day. So I'd like to invite Max. Max, it's your session. You do as you please to come over and begin to start the actual session of Imbadu. Thanks.
Ngos kakhulu, Jojo. Greetings to everyone this evening. As you've so eloquently alluded, my name is Amandla Didiza. Let's not worry about the relations. But basically, I think everything has been captured in terms of what this particular engagement seeks to encompass. But over and above everything, I think I just want to reinforce the fact that it is a space for young people to be able to take their rightful place in the affairs of not only just the Nelson Mandela University, but with every space of engagement that they should have a particular responsibility that they play in ensuring that they participate and engage to the best of their ability. So this is not me trying to reiterate what other speakers have said here, but I just want to implore you guys, or rather invoke a sense of responsibility that you have towards engaging. Kuba kaloku mawethu ngesiXhosa kuthiwa umbona umnandi ngochubelana. So we should be able to create a space, no matter who you are, where you come from, what your social context or your orientation is, be able to contribute towards meaningful, realistic, and impactful conversations. So I just want to be able to implore you guys, as the speakers are well versed in their focus areas, to be able to just take up that responsibility and engage with us. So I do want to start off, without further ado, we're going to shoot straight to the hip. I do want to invite our first panelist, Miss Itumeleng Indipile Motlhabane, and I'll just ask that as she makes their way, we'll clap for them at the end. I just want to introduce them fully so that at the end, as they come through, we'll just applaud each speaker as they make their way and sit down. Now, Itumeleng Motlhabane is the provincial head of organizing for a democratic youth movement that organizes working class school communities that is called Equal Education. She holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree and is working towards her honors degree from the University of Fort Hare. She's quite versed in student, or rather activism in its whole, and she has participated in a number of programs such as the Young African Leaders Institution program, Just Lead from Stellenbosch University, as well as the Fort Hare Autumn School from the Friedrich Albert Stiftung South Africa. She is also an individual who is passionate about women's health and HIV programs. But over and above that, I've gotten the sense that she is sound in youth promotion. So can we give a round of applause for Ms. Itumeleng Motlhabane? Our second speaker is the lady in red, who has decided to come back home. Someone who has recently walked these paths and has come to her alma mater, Ms. Awe Tufatyela, who works as the Transformation Communication Officer at Stellenbosch University's Transformation Office. Prior to this, she worked as a researcher for the Economic Freedom Fighters in the South African Parliament. She's written a number of papers and extensive research at international conferences about student activism, Eurocentrism, and decolonization of knowledge in South Africa. She holds a BA Honours degree in Corporate Communication and a BA degree in MCC from the Nelson Mandela University. Can we give a round of applause for Ms. Awe Tufatyela? And last but not least, as they refer to him by our SRC president, to Comrade Thabo Shingange. I don't want to lose the order. He is the former South spokesperson, currently serving as the Deputy Director for Communication Outreach, or rather Community Outreach, at the Department of Communication and Digital Transformation. He is a staunch Fees Must Fall activist, currently pursuing his PhD, and is the former University of Pretoria president, as well as a recipient of the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship. And I think one of the key highlights from you is that you also participated as a member of the COVID-19 Ministerial Committee. Can we give a round of applause for Mr. or rather Comrade Thabo Shingange? Is this thing on? Okay, no, good. We're gonna, as I said, get right into it. And I think, colleagues, if you have your programs, maybe they do suggest what the focus areas are. But I'm gonna start with Miss Itumeleng, if she does not mind, so that she can just make her opening remarks. I think one of the things that do happen when you're speaking here is that you just get straight into the program. I believe that formalities have been made. So for our community online, I'd like to just greet those who are following us on YouTube. Please feel free to engage with us. Please feel free to share your comments and anything that you might add that might be of value to the conversation. You're more than welcome to share it. We'll be engaging with you as we connect throughout the engagements. Greetings to everyone who is here this evening. If andikbulsango xolo, but I mean, all protocol observed. Right, getting right into it. Itumeleng, I just want to invite you. Everyone's mic is on. By the way, everyone has a mic, so you guys can just switch on your mics. Give it about a 3-second lead, and then you can speak from there. Itumeleng's focus area. Please lead us into discussion.
Thank you so much. I think I have been fairly introduced, and my speaking niche would be on how harnessing youth activism actually contributes to building a conscious young people and actually feeds into the engagement that we want to talk about today. So I think broadly, when I had thought about this theme, right, I was excited that it has the word in it, realistic, right? Because I do think that I started as an activist when I was a student, and when you're a student, your main community becomes university, right? So it's other students, it's lecturers, so you engage to a certain level, which then sometimes excludes you from what's happening in reality. When I got my appointment at Equal Education in 2018, one of my first tasks was to do political classes. And I wasn't doing political classes for university students, but for learners who had dropped out of high school, who had not been accepted in university. And so basically the lost youth, right? The ones who are nowhere in the system. And it was such a difficult task, right? Because in all the years that I felt I'm an activist, that I understood bell hooks, I understood it from a perspective of an academic student, from a perspective of academia, from a perspective of a student. And I struggled to translate my politics to a student who then dropped out of high school. How do I translate my politics to someone who's doing grade 10? And so I do think that is at the core of where I want to frame this discussion, right? Firstly, how do we create so for me, this is where I'm at right now, that if a discussion was realistic and impactful, it must trigger you to act, right? So that's basically my definition of what an impactful and a realistic a discussion. It must trigger you to act, right? We don't need any more of this at this point, right? And that's where I'm at. So I always think that I started as a debater in my earlier years, and I did a lot of talking. And so I did say I'm going to talk about my experiences at Equal Education a lot. But when I've had the task of then translating my politics and my activism to young people who have never had the interaction of going to university, who've never read bell hooks, who've never found Black consciousness appetizing or something that they want to talk about on a daily basis, how do I then bring that conversation to them? And there is something that we cannot run away from, right? The fact that what we need right now in South Africa is people's power. What we need is grassroots consciousness, where our people are empowered with information. And obviously you see the dire need of this in the ANC constantly being voted back into power. We saw people getting excited that Mabuyane was voted back into power just last week. And so, and the reasons thereof that people voice out when they're voting, right? Are just clear that that people are still not empowered about what the power that they hold and why they need to be voted into power and things like that. I know comrades are pushing the renewal, but until we see it in action, comrades, we shall not believe. So I think then where I am going with this is that how do we then bridge the gap, right? back to equal education. At equal education, I don't just organize a group of learners. I organize learners, parents, teachers, right? And so all of these people are at different spheres of life. And running a political class with them is a lot, right? So you'd be talking about feminism and one woman is gonna stand up and go, are you suggesting that kids must wear short skirts now? What about rape? And you have to start at the beginning, right, of the conversation. And so I do want to bring my first idea, which is how do we then bring in, and to also trigger you to think, right, because the solutions are not with me. How do we then bridge the gap between what the conversation is in academia, what the conversation is in our communities, what the conversation is with the generation that is growing up, right? And so, and then the second question is, what are the tools that would then take us forward, right? So, as of recently, I'm part of a team that's starting a reading revolution, right? As one of the key tools to bring us to a conscious grassroots activism that perpetuates what we want, right? Which is with black people being able to place themselves in the system and moving our issues forward. Issues like decolonization, we know the issues, right? But I think the question that always remains unanswered is the question of senza njani with these issues that we have. And we do know where we want to go, but still there is this, when I used to debate, they used to call it a problem solution gap, right? We would say, how do you then cross from the problem to the solution? And there's always that gap. We would say, senza njani, how do we move? And so I'm now presenting you with something that you can add on, which is a reading revolution. And it's something that Equal Education also is based on at the beginning of their activism, where they were like libraries, but when they were fighting for libraries, they realized, oh, someone's child is dying because there's no roof, so we must then go back to infrastructure. So I think it's to think, would say, where and how do we get information to our communities? I was listening to fellow panelists when they were talking about social media, and one of the things that 2020 brought into my activism that was not so glamorous is that no one is available on the internet that you need to talk to. There is no one that you need to conscientize that is available on the internet. The person that you need to conscientize, enduring abuse over and over again and framing it as something totally different, right? And that is the person that you need to conscientize. So how do we then bridge the gap and go and reach there? But also I think it's, this is another not related to equal education work. I've done work with the AU as their youth sounding board member, and I was supposedly should be advising them on how to make their policies accessible to poor young people, right? And I think I then realized another big gap where we have not placed ourselves in a position where we translate policies, even South African policies that govern. I know there's a new movement that has been founded in Cape Town, Movement for Care. It translates municipal policies to people in different areas in Cape Town. And so that's another area that I've identified as a gap. How do we then make sure that the things that are in government, everyone is conscious of? And I think that's where then my politics are. Lastly, before I give it over to you, is going back now to the conclusion of what I'm trying to say, is the question of senza njani, right? How do we then move? What are the tools that are available to us? What is working for us and what is not working? You're the entire time. Shop steward voice. So what is working for us and what's essentially not working, right? So I want to challenge you to think about the status quo and where we are and how we're governed. Is our democracy working for us? Is the partisan system serving us? Who is it serving? And how do we then engage with the system in a way that is meaningful to us? At some point, I remember someone asked me this question in an interview, and I was like, actually, dismantle the entire system and make us start our own. And they said that for that one opportunity, we took you because we wanted you to advise us on how do we start our own. And so it's been one of the questions that have been in my mind, that are we doing the right thing by breaking our necks, trying to engage the current system that we have, right? Instead of thinking about how do we then create our own that is going to be engagement friendly, right? And so I want to leave it there at this point and give it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Thank you for your opening remarks. I think before I move on to our second speaker, one of the things that you captured me on, it was a very strong point that you made in terms of how, engagements that are really meaningful, realistic, and impactful should trigger you to act. And I think half of the time, the reason why people feel like they're stuck in a rut is because they don't have agency. Half of that speaks to agency, and that is a state of being where your actions produce a particular effect. And I believe that our people are in that state, but we see a common thread here as someone who works for Equal Education, where we're creating spaces of engagement, and one of your focused areas was around active citizenship. And if we're then trying to engage a room full of people, my biggest fear, and I'm sure half of you comrades have been able to see that in the spaces that we've been in over the years, when you create a space of engagement, you tend to see same faces over and over again in similar spaces. That means that we're now leaving the bulk of our people as Hans. That means that there's no transition of information to everyone. There are no growth metrics. We can't benchmark the quality of the person, or rather the end product. So what I want to know from you, just briefly, is that my biggest fear is that the brighter we become, the blinder we then become towards our own limitations. In terms of bridging that gap, how do we ensure that education, equal education, then becomes a lifelong process for everyone in these spaces of engagement, and not just for those that are interested in these things, are woke in inverted commas, or those that feel as if they can contribute towards engagements?
Okay, thank you so much. So I think firstly for me, I believe that everyone has the agency to act, right? It's just misplaced. If you take a taxi and then you go, oh, urhulumende wethu, it sells and does. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone knows what the government is doing wrong. Everyone knows what they want from this government. It's just that it goes back to the question that I posed, Uguti, the system is violent. It's not accessible. It doesn't come to us in a way that we want to engage on. A lot of us who are sitting in this panel right now, we're talking about how nervous we are talking to young people like this. We don't have to do it that way, right? I do think that conscientizing each other has been formalized so much that it's only friendly to a person who is in academia. And I think that is one of the things that we're doing wrong. Even the activism spaces are not accessible, right? I remember in my beginning of activism, I used to talk about how difficult it is to be a feminist that is poor, that is from a rural area and a village, right? Because you come into those spaces and feel like already there is Oitu who are heads of provinces, already there is Opudmex who are well-versed in their fields. And so someone else does not feel, this is the space that I want to be. I'd rather be in my room, talk to my roommate about it, I'd rather be in Parklands and actively doing something about my socio-economic issues, right? So I think then the second thing is building a conscious and an ethical youth, right? So I'm a former student in the University of Fort Hare, maybe current, but I think one of the things that have always angered me is seeing young people given opportunities like being SRC president, and serving other young people, but they're just not doing that. They're serving themselves, they're saving the ANC, No, comrade. they say, okay, sorry, but they're saving. I am blunt like that, and I think it's okay to have different opinions, but this is my experience, and this is what I see as one of the biggest barriers to date to meaningful engagement with the system, not by just students, but by everyone in South Africa, right? And so I think young people get into these positions and they not, and I think it's an issue of consciousness, right? They're not conscious enough, ukuthi, when I get into this position, what is it that I'm exactly serving? What are my immediate goals? How do I move? They get into a system that is already violent and dictating to them how to move, right? And then there's no space for them to engage ngendlela that they were engaging when they wanted to get to where they are. So I think part of the things that we need to harness, I don't know how when we are hungry, is being ethical, right? And how do we then make sure that within the resources that we have, also I think we want it easy, right? I think even this activism thing, we don't want to suffer for it. We are activists that talk about their wellness a lot, and I really want to be well, guys, from the deep in the bottom of my heart. I want to do it for myself in this generation. But for us to get to the solutions, it's really going to need to be uncomfortable, right? And I think that is part of the things that we need to realize when we are having realistic and impactful conversations. We need to speak to the current issues, comrades. We cannot sugarcoat izinto ezisehlelayo thina on a daily basis, right? But also I think we must be willing to go out of what our comfort zone is and try to find other people. And by meaning of that is that part of what equal education has been trying to do is to go to where people are active already and try to say, comrades, this is where it's at, right? Can we then conscientize ourselves even further? Because when you go to communities, each and every day, there is someone doing something, trying to take the community forward. There are communities who are building schools on their own. There are communities who there's someone at the clinic who's making sure that elderly, like doing volunteer work. And so I don't want to believe that young people don't want to move. I don't want to believe that people don't want to engage with the system. I really want to believe that everyone has the agency to act and they want to act, but there's still existing barriers. And this is the last thing I'm going to say. One of the biggest barriers to youth, right, engaging with the system and like engaging realistically is this thing of tokenism. I cannot tell you how many opportunities I've been invited on just to add a quota, just to be the black woman in and like to project. We have projected our voices. We have tried to engage, but it's hit a wall, right? And which has pushed us to sometimes engage violently. But I think there's still a lot of barriers that we need to question in the system for us to continuously having this impactful. And the last thing, I promise, is thinking intergenerationally. And this is something that is still a challenge to many organizations, because right now the civic society is shrinking, right? Since COVID, people are losing funding sphere is changing. Now people are wanting to fund climate change. Democracy is not that important anymore. So I think we then need to start thinking about what is self-organizing, right? Where our people are able to organize without Uitu being there to lead that organizing. So, and that starts, and a key thing where it starts is engagement, right? Is where we meet each other where we are and understanding why we do things the way we do, and at that point, being able to move together. So I do think that Abelungu think very intergenerationally. They know, I'm doing this in this generation so that the next 3 generations, they benefit this way. And so I do think that equal education is adopting that as part of our theory of change, that we're not just building grassroots activism and a conscious youth, but we're also building a youth that is going to be a foundation for generations to come that will keep on this activism and organizing, even when there's like no money to have formalized organizing. So how do we make sure that there's young people in a taxi talking about what our democracy is, what it means, engaging with people? How do we make sure that Mgidini, you know, when the bras are sitting, there's a little chat about how do we then take our communities forward? How do we make sure that we have a back and forth a little bit about how we take our country forward? Because at this point, creating special spaces isn't very working. You see the same faces over and over again. So we need to go to where the people are to find these engagements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Itumeleng. I think andifuna ungena kumhlaba ka-awethu, so I just want to allow you the space to be able to make your opening remarks when it comes to promotion of an ethical society through ensuring a consciousness. The floor is yours, man.
Thank you, Max. Molweni, it feels good to be home. It feels so good to be back. Ndicela nixolele ngale and what would it entail? To reimagine the ways we engage would require us to first acknowledge what and who has historically informed how we frame engagement, especially in academic spaces. After all, a precursor to engagement or being fully engaged is awareness. What and who has defined what quality, realistic, and impactful engagement is? How do we gauge the impact and quality of engagements in an African, and I say that in inverted commas, African university that is nothing more than an institution situated in Africa that acts as a guardian of Western values, traditions, and worldviews? We have assimilated into a culture of engagement that is not our own, that says that when we speak, there is a hierarchy, there is language, there is terminology, there is jargon, and there is an accent. There's also a sense of superiority from one view to another. And sometimes it's not the content that is thought to be superior or even reasonable, but the accent that is delivering it. As Black people in academic spaces who have moved from the periphery of Western academic and intellectual engagement to the center, we have perpetuated the same type of exclusionary practices that nullify and silence the voices of those whom we do not consider to be valid contributors to academic discourse because of their lack of access to our elitist hua-hua spaces. We are closed off to genuine learning opportunities by not opening up the engagement space to the very people whose lived experiences are fundamental to shaping these institutions that we exist in and the dialogues we ought to be having for social transformation to take place. So how do we engage in a way that is meaningful to us? Now, when I received the brief for Imbadu series, there was a definition for quality, realistic, and impactful engagements. And I will paraphrase, it was that it is types of engagements that are directed towards transforming society and forging unity of purpose. It further stated that these engagements understand the value of Ubuntu. And I thought, okay, there it is. That should be the point of departure, Ubuntu. And not this bastardized and appropriated kind of Ubuntu that has been repackaged and sold back to us. You see, one cannot understand nor appreciate Ubuntu when you do not know what Ubuntu is. When we say ngesixhosa ungumntu, what do we mean? We know this. When someone has done something, kuthiwe yo ubani gumntu lo. What does that mean? Because to have or practice ubuntu, kufuneke qala ube ngumntu. Please note how I did not translate that to English. And I cannot translate it to English. Renowned South African academic sculptor and poet Utatu Piti Kantuli, in his writing, explores how indigenous knowledge systems can be used as counter-hegemonic tool by excavating the archaeology of their origins and thought systems, starting with language. Language is and has always been a big defining factor in how we conceive and express ourselves within our immediate and extended communities and the rest of the world. A language represents a specific worldview and a specific ontology. There are words and concepts that elude translation. Nangesixhosa siye sithi isiXhosa sitoliko. As Africans, we have always resorted to our languages, our culture, and our traditions to guide us in our drive towards development. Language was, and still is, the tool of the oppressor. The obliteration of some indigenous languages in former colonies and the exclusion of native languages in discourse has ensured continuous Eurocentric and Western indoctrination. Language informs a people's understanding of the world and it communicates who they are. When we adopted the language of the colonizer, we also adopted his way of thinking, his way of being, his way of seeing, and even his way of dreaming. We adopted this way of engaging with the world. After all, language guides how we as people reason, and our reasoning is tied to our consciousness. Uitu mentioned consciousness. She spoke extensively about conscientization. So here's the question, since we are reimagining engagement, and please feel free to shout out the answer. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word consciousness? Anyone? When I say consciousness, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Biko, okay. Biko, all right. Anything else? Anyone else? When I say consciousness, what do you think? The soul. I love that. The soul. Anyone else? Ukuqika. Enkos. Anyone else? Okay, we've got Biko, we've got the soul, we've got ukuqika. To the person who said Biko, and you don't have to answer me. This question is open to anyone. What is consciousness, or black consciousness, ngesixhosa? I'll wait. So I want to challenge myself, you, and my fellow panelists to free ourselves from Western epistemological domination. And kumshimaninville? Dipinde? Western epistemological domination. Do. You know, sometimes we need to understand things ngobutina, ngobuntu, in order to appreciate them for what they truly are and the meaning that they hold for us as abantu. This then becomes an affirmation that concepts can be articulated in the mother tongue and that philosophy exists in indigenous languages and discourse. It is also adequate, it is valid, it is valuable, and it is enough. As Africans, we can and we should locate and assert ourselves academically and intellectually through our identity. Africans were told by their colonizers that they are backward, they are savage, and that we had no history until the West discovered us and civilized us. Yet there is nothing civilized about enslavement, colonization, mass murder, rape, torture, and dispossession. According to Tatuntuli, a refocus on African intellectualism towards a more holistic vision of society to bring about new methods of socialization is an absolute necessity. We must, of course, be mindful that the way we act and think is a direct result of our socialization. Ntuli stresses that pre-colonial Africa was characterized more by variations than by differences in cultural, expressions. Africans sought to create societies that were based on interdependence, interrelations, and interconnectedness of all phenomena. That was the premise of an ethical society. To conscientize ourselves, we need to access knowledge that is archived through lineage. Currently, our knowledge of self and the world around us comes from without, not from within. A changed and conscious society requires us to disrupt the status quo and form alternatives and new frameworks that are not tainted by what has been disrupted. If we are to change anything, we need to first change the way we think. We ought to approach our ability for social transformation as something that comes from within. To reimagine and reclaim quality, realistic, and impactful engagements requires us to engage diverse experiences and perspectives. It requires us to challenge our own complicity and lack of drive and interest, to invoke African knowledge systems as a basis upon which to build new knowledge systems, for the purposes of contributing to the task of bringing about an ethical society through renewed consciousness. Our consciousness as a society requires us to embark on a journey of reclamation. It requires dismantling and destruction in order to rebuild, re-establish, redefine, and reimagine. To reimagine does not always require a complete divorce from what is already established, but a reclamation and rediscovering of what is and has always been authentically ours.
Round of applause, please. You know, Awed, what I'm gathering from your remarks is that, and I hope the room captured it, that the antidote for these skewed tenets is simple. That it's not easy. Because I think a large part is that in our spaces of engagement, the reason why we're not really creating a large part is that informative and impactful engagement, the reason why we're not really getting to add new knowledge, that we're not gaining any grounds as people, and we're not really coming to negotiate new knowledge as how we're not gaining any grounds as people is because we come to the negotiating table as before you are that a transformation community. But before you are that, and you are and you are at the very bottom, a human frame. So I think we don't engage with that in mind. Our frame is for us to inform or share opinions or shape opinions based on our perspective, based on our opinions and our lived realities, or inverted commas, lived realities. And I think a larger space that has to deal with that is the space of social media. We want to purport to fetter certain opinions that drive our own narratives and our own aspirations based on whatever ideologies we subscribe to. And they have nothing to do with interconnectedness. They have nothing to do with reconstruction and reimagination, but they have everything to do with sensationalism, which is a large failure. I'm just gathering thoughts from your submissions. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think one of the things that I really want to drive home is that we're already seeing that at the end of the day, the antidote is really simple. But if we're coming to the table and we're coming into spaces of engagement with that frame of mind, we'll never reach breaking ground. Because so what I really want to kind of gather towards you is, how do we move from a character-based engagement and position of knowledge creation? And when I mean character, I mean the characters that we type on social media. From a character-based to a character-building engagement space. How do we make that link?
Thank you, Max. You know, your first remark, you spoke about how spaces of engagement, the current spaces of engagement that we find ourselves in, there is no new knowledge production within those spaces. And I mean, it's simple. You cannot use the tools of the oppressor. Itin la quote to dismantle. Itin, does anyone know that quote? Yes.
Oh, the same level of thought.
Yes, we can't, so basically, we're coming in, I think Itu said this as well. You come into a space that already tells you how to move. You come into a space that already tells you how to speak, how to think, how to frame your thoughts, right? And using those tools, you then want to resolve the problems that were created by those very tools. It can't work like that. You know, when you talk about, for example, social media, again, you brought in social media. I think Itu covered a lot. I'm going to keep quoting her. She did say there's nobody to conscientize in that space. Firstly, because everyone on social media knows it all anyway.
Sure.
But then the real people that we need to bring into the fray, into the conversation, from the periphery to the center, are not found on social media. And in order for you to do that, is where you remove the person, like you said, you remove Awetu, who is coming as the transformation communications officer, ukhangele ubuntu bakho. And Ubuntu is not reserved for those people with whom you share ideas. It is not reserved for those people with whom you share a political home. Hint, hint. It is not, you know, and one of the biggest challenges, I think, also with our engagement spaces is that we are preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
We are sitting in spaces with like-minded people, people who speak the same conversation. Sifike, sivumelane, we click, we clap, we within. And then what happens? Itu said, is it impactful, is it realistic, if I'm not going to be moved to act? If andizuthi xa ndiphuma apha kubekho into ethi, okay, now that you have heard what has been said, what are you going to do about it? I think it was SRC president who said in his opening remarks as well that, you know, we want to produce the type of graduate that is able to go home and fix the problems in their own community. That is Ubuntu. Sing, abantu, sing beyond yourself. So I do think that, Yabona, your question has run away now. I did say you mustn't invite elders to these things. But I do think that, you know, just to wrap it up, that indeed, if we are going to move, yes, from character-based, you said from character?
Character-based to character building.
Character-based to character building, yes. We need to disrupt. We need to break it down, recreate, transform, reimagine.
But there's a cost there. And I think the cost is setting yourself on fire in order to keep others warm. And it's a cost that not a lot of people are willing to pay.
No, it's far. No, there is a cost, but there are always casualties of war. Unfortunately, we are in a war here. There are always going to be casualties. Nothing in life comes easy. It's not going to come easy. There are going to be casualties. There are those people who will lay their lives on the line. There are those who won't. I mean, in any war, not everybody is going to be on the front line. Not everybody is a general. You know, you've got people that are there to help those who are wounded. You've got the guys that are cooking to make sure that the soldiers are fed. You know, everybody has a role to play. You find your place and you play it well. And no role is insignificant.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think that's the message that we should all drive home, is that at the end of the day, everyone has a particular role to play. But the responsibilities are about taking up yoke and driving yourself home. So thank you very much. Just another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, to Awe Tufakela for her submissions. And I understand that also in myself, my questions were long-winded because I just wanted to frame some of the discussions and package them. But andizunikela maxesha ndizawugqithela khona. We're going to our last speaker, Mr. Thabo Shingange, who will be speaking on the role of universities as being in service to society in renewing engagements. Comrade, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I don't think that's what I'll be talking about, but okay. Let me start by first and foremost greeting everybody. I don't know if I'm audible enough at the back. I'm not. Am I audible now? I feel like I'm shouting at the ones in front, but okay. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to such an important conversation. Of course, to the facilitator and my fellow panelists, it's tricky to speak last because half the time, all the points they have taken, so I'm busy here trying to think, now what do I say, you know? But anyway, so I think we're invited today to have an interesting conversation around reimagining quality. I'm also very anxious about speaking now because I heard I must strike a balance between this particular accent and also to be able to say, comrades, look, let's go now. You know, so please bear with me at the back. I will try my best to be on balance. But anyways, I start the conversation from a different standpoint. I think many people here ask, how do we reimagine quality, realistic, and impactful conversations? And I sit down and I cringe. Because when I saw it, I cringed. I said, Aibo, what is quality according to who? You know, what is realistic according to who? Before we can measure the issue of impact. So I want us to first break it down. I start from a standpoint that I studied philosophy. I know it's an engineering building here, but there's a philosopher, I think it's Derrida, actually I'm lying, whatever his name might be. But it says, or it reads rather, that human beings are storytelling beings. So we can only answer the question, what are we to do, if you can answer the prior question of what history or narrative do I find myself a part of? I'll repeat that. So human beings, we are storytelling beings. So we can only answer the question, what are we meant to be doing? Only and if only we can answer the prior question of what history and narrative do we find ourselves a part of. Now, when we were speaking, I think, I can't remember if it was the facilitator or was the president. In fact, it was the lady in red. And she was giving definitions. And I think, President, in your opening remark, you started off by saying it's important to have these conversations outside of the classroom so that you're not governed by the rules of the classroom. And I chuckled a bit because I think to myself, in every engagement, there are rules. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the underlying rules governing a particular engagement at any point in time? Why am I raising this, right? When I think from the background that I come from, much like my colleague on my right, I'm having a brain freeze, like much my colleague on my right, I come from I was at the University of Pretoria in 2015. And many of you in 2015, I don't know, some are old, some are young, grade 9, grade 10, you never know. But during that particular time, I have reflections because the theme here is higher education and we're in the university setup. So I have a theme to myself and I ask myself, okay, let us create a practical example of why it is important to question the underlying rules that are governing a conversation. In 2015, many of you would have taken to the streets. In fact, in 2015, many students took to the streets in protest, in demand, shutting down our universities, trying to, to have an engagement around perhaps, the high cost of fees in our country. But there's a colleague from the University of Fort Hare, not you. Her name is Lindokuhle Kama. She writes a brilliant master's thesis, I think, and she questions around fees must fall time, from where do you speak? So what is the privilege that you're afforded at the time of your particular engagement, right? Now we're sitting here in the room. I wanted to make a social experiment, but I don't know if I'm confident enough to go into it. But we're sitting in a room here, right? And there are men, there are women, there are people non-binary and so forth and so forth. But I always ask myself, in this room, as we are sitting now, if I were to ask, for instance, and you don't have to answer me, you can answer it honestly in your head or whatever the case might be. How many of you are comfortable enough to speak in a room full of white people? You don't have to answer, but reflect on that question, properly. How many, if you were to walk into a room now and you found white people now and they gave you a mic and said, speak, how many of you would be comfortable enough to speak? Gents, you are laughing, so I'll come back to you guys. Ladies, if you walked into a room full of men, just men, you were given a mic to speak, how many of you would be comfortable enough to speak in a room full of men? So you were laughing at white people, whereas the problem is men. All of us collectively seated here in a room full of elders, right? We're in a university setup, SRC, you are engaging professors, you are engaging managements, you are engaging ministers and so forth. In a room full of elders, there's some deep Xhosa, so I was hearing deep language, Xhosa, but if you were to walk into a room, how many of you would feel comfortable to share or to speak up honestly and openly so in a room in this very same setup? That already tells you that in every engagement or in every setup, there are underlying rules that are governing a conversation, even if those rules are tacitly implied, right? Notions of patriarchy. I asked how many women are comfortable to speak in a room full of men. I'm speaking to notions of patriarchy. When I speak to issues of race, we can speak to issues of class, right? Because for the longest of time, we have used economic rationality, especially when it comes to class. The Marxists will forgive me for now. But we have used economic rationality as a basis of legitimacy, right? And so the moment those dynamics and all those power relations are skewed, we begin to miss each other in the conversation. So I want us to take us back to that particular point. Reimagining quality, realistic, and impactful conversations. But we're unable to speak in a room if I'm not comfortable or if I'm not humanized in that particular room. I like what she said we need to begin an element of deconstruction, right? When I think to myself that, okay, what are the kind of conditions that were meant to be enabling in order for a conversation to start? I'll repeat. What are the conditions that were supposed to be enabling first before a conversation can begin? Because the moment you want to change the rules whilst the conversation has started, you've already excluded a large portion of people. I'll make an example. I've already excluded people who are perhaps members of the community who are non-binary, because I'm giving very heteronormative examples. But I'm showing you how tacit exclusion becomes. Because even myself, had I not pondered on that thought, I've already excluded somebody from an engagement, right? So what are the conditions that were meant to be changing, first and foremost, especially in university setup, right? President, you walk into a vice chancellor's office, you are going to have an engagement, students are hungry, students have no fees, NSFAS, we all know it's a crisis. You walk into the university, the first thing the vice chancellor says, we have no money. What you're asking for is unrealistic. How, when your colleague next to you has not eaten last night? So who defines what is realistic? Who defines what is unrealistic, right? You walk into engagement with a minister, president, you would know this many a times. You try to raise your views, you try to raise your opinions, you are told it's unrealistic. According to who's definition of reality? So I think what I'm trying to draw ourselves to here is that I love how she framed. I swear we didn't exchange notes, guys, I promise you. As she's sitting here, she was speaking to the element of Ubuntu, right? And not this bastardized way of how it has been repackaged and sold to us, you said. And I asked myself here, humanness, right? Who is human? You know, how do we define our elements of human? Because if I don't see you as a human being, someone said to me they don't see race, and I got so confused. I said, if you don't see race, then you don't see me. And if you don't see me as dark as I am, then you don't see the history and the narrative that I come a part of. That in a room full of white people, I'll probably be intimidated. That in a room full of white old men, I'll probably feel an inferiority complex. That in a room, perhaps if I was a woman in a room full of men, I'd probably feel an element of patriarchy that humbles me or that shuts down my conversation. It's a pretty hot in here in front, sorry. So what I'm trying to draw us to is that we need to change the underlying historical, cultural, and institutional, perhaps even social aspects that we have taken almost as secondary, that we have adopted without questioning. And I blame our universities, because universities try to train us to behave and to act in a particular decorum, to speak in a particular way in order to be listened to. I promise you, if I came here and my English was butchered, none of you, someone would be laughing by now at the back. If I came in here and I couldn't pronounce certain words, someone would be laughing, engaged, or no longer engaged in the conversation from the back. So we need to deconstruct cultural notions of being, ontological notions, our understanding of being, of humanness. Who do we speak? Who can speak at what particular point in time? Gender, race, and so forth. Last but not least, I think what is really, really important here is to reframe the whole idea of an engagement, right? We are sitting here in front, and it's almost as if we are the sole, or we have an opium of knowledge over this particular theme, because the dynamics of the room are already skewed. We have the knowers in front, the panelists apparently, and the listeners that have nothing to contribute but to just listen to the nonsense that we are saying. You understand? Same setup in a lecture room. You're not taught to question. There's a lecturer who stands in front, they talk, and your role is to just go regurgitate what they said in the exam if you want to pass. And I'm saying we need to deconstruct those power relations, those power dynamics first and foremost, in order to then have quality, realistic, and impactful conversations. But in my closing line, I think I want to draw us to that. How do we then begin to bridge the gap between what has been said, what is being said, and what is going to be said? Because each and every single time, I'm from 2015, the same conversation, the same engagement I thought was realistic, was impactful at the time in 2015. It's the same conversation you're probably having today in 2022. It's the same conversation we'll probably have in 2030 of patriarchy, of gender, of sexism, homophobia, and all these particular things. But until we get to a point whereby we can all agree on a starting point of humanness. Only then can we reimagine the qualification, the conversation. For instance, I'll make an example. I'm a deputy director for the Deputy Minister in Communications and Digital Technologies. Now, I'm just 27 for crying out loud. You understand? Now you go into a, why am I saying deconstruct these things? You go into a setup, many, the state is old, you know. You get there, people are 40, people are 50. And when they see me, they see their child. Now this is tricky. Because in this particular situation, as a deputy director, I'm your superior. In fact, I'm your boss. When are you child? Now if we're meant to have an engagement, you and I, what kind of engagement are we going to have when you see a child because of our cultural dynamics? No, you don't respond to Awantawadala. What do you mean, child? What kind of engagement are we going to have when somebody who is 50, a vice chancellor, when you walk in at the second day, I was in second day when I left Fees Must Follow the University of Pretoria. I was, what, 19? When I walk into a room with the vice chancellor, all of these accolades, and so for professors, for crying out loud, what kind of engagement is she going to have with me who has not even passed the undergrad? Because to her, I've already created a hierarchy. You mentioned something about hierarchy. So let's disrupt hierarchy, first and foremost. Disrupt the notion of hierarchy first, so that a conversation can come to Mdala. I don't even call them Bopra, Mike, Bontonto, Mike, Silo. Because that's the only way you hear me. Because once I say that, I thought, Mike, Silo, kindly pass this. Mike, kindly do that. And only I'm disrupting the notion, but you can't speak to me like that. Then how are you going to have any meaningful engagement, any realistic engagement, when we have not deconstructed the underlying rules governing the conversation? I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Thabo. Yeah, there's been a lot that's been said, colleagues, and I think in as much as we've been speaking, I don't just want to hold the conversation here, you know, I don't know if we've got mic runners that are going to be able, yeah, certainly, okay. I do have some questions for the panel, but I would not want to make this just a dialogue amongst the opium, those who do know. But at the end of the day, allow it to be a free-flowing conversation that allows everyone to engage from the back to the front to the sides of the room. So please, we're going to open it up for a round of questions. I might have interjections here and there because there are some questions that, as the panel has been speaking, have been framed through my mind. But I do want us to open it up for us to be able to comment if you want to, pose questions, or share any ideas, thoughts, and opinions that you know. Because at the end of the day, the playing field has been leveled. You know, the conversation doesn't end here. They were just drivers of discussion to be able to lay certain statements and to make certain claims on the floor so that we may engage in this conversation in order for this platform to be a platform. So if those could assist me, I'm just going to note a couple of hands. We'll be taking 5 per round, and then we'll be able to pose them to everyone, perhaps, because some of the panelists were even throwing questions to the room. If you'd like, you can throw a question to the room. So I'll just be taking hands, colleagues, if there are any. We've got one in the front. I'll just note hands as you guys lift them up. As short as I am able to see at the back. So Ningawar, I've noted one, yes. Are there any more hands that are coming to the room? I've got a second one there on my right in the middle of the room. Is that it? Mr. Sneff, we've got you. Anyone else? So let's take those 3 for now. Sure, my brother here in the front with a white t-shirt and a black cap. Just bring it closer to you and just, it should. Tap it.
Did you switch it on?
Okay, firstly, brief summary of Youth Lab. The first Imbadu series that I attended first. I took down notes, but I didn't say anything because I could sense that, man, one of the most discouraging things as a young person would be going out to vote. My first observation would be that on that ballot paper, there are more than 10 black political parties. This is a sign of just division amongst black people and what the apartheid regime core foundation was, which is divide and conquer. As black people, we are pitted against each other, and change seems like a distant dream. The solution is so easy, but yet so hard. Firstly, the education systems in South Africa. There is no connection from like the foundation phase to tertiary phase. As in grade 1, how can it be my home language would be English? I've been translating my whole life. Secondly, political parties. Political parties, I have no political party affiliation in, because I could see that these people are just pushing political party agendas. For example, when it's pre-election, heading to election, you'd see them in our communities rolling out food parcels. During the election, they'd start doing something about the problems, temporarily, like putting plaster on the wound. Then there's after election. After election, you'd see that hype would fall down, and eventually, like let's say 2 years after, there'll be a spark for service delivery again. The economic issue in South Africa. Our economic issue is not with the white people. Our money amongst there's no black economy. Our money, once a black person gets money, they straight out go buy audio, foreign things. What about Tumakosa from Port Elizabeth? What's it doing? You'd see that people on social media will be like, hey man, that's a luxury plan. Also, there's a quote that I came up with, like precision over speed, meaning that you must be precise. Don't act with your emotion, that speed. Once you see a threat, calm down, Paula, and plan and plot. Because I know myself, once I plan and plot on a hungry stomach, operating on water, fruit, just a couple of meat in a songa, I'll get you. Also, revolving around the theme, reimagining quality, reimagining quality, being realistic and impactful. I think I've covered that. Going back to what the speakers have said, I've been taking down notes. Growing the youth, realistic as it should. Growing the youth, as much as people would like, but we should be also realistic and work amongst lesikuyo ngoku, because ukukhala kuzonceda. Realistic as in, we should have a logical and chronological order. The average young person with average marks are barely recognized, and the stats are seen as the measure of intelligence. For example, umna ndiyazazi, clever gqithi. But I barely speak on anything because people just act on emotions. Bringing conversations like PCM, Black Conscious Movement, need to be contextualized, as in, we are moving in a more technological world. Kuko Facebook, kuko TikTok, kuko YouTube. You can't be posting about it because the content yale message yakuzama uyithumela will be lost in translation ku post, and so xabana koko nabantu abadum. Ballot paper is definitely not the answer. Going back, how to bridge the gap and the youth to be interested in politics. The question ebendiyibambe up. It's very simple at times. Susa lana bandimdala now, sondibiza kodini. Indoda akutandoluka nami. Undibiza kodini because nami ngizakubonisa abantu angigoyiki nami. Education and quality. I think I have pointed it out, but we've been translating our whole entire lives in English. But as soon as you go home, you spend the most, like personally, then funda apparatus, perseverance. Pana, Phana uyangena ngo-8, then uphume 20 past 3. Ube ne-double period ye-English njani. Ufike kokwenu uthetha isiXhosa, bafuna ni-adjuste njani. Social media at times really dilutes the message because text often gets diluted. As in, nambe nalam belam tabe ngaliqondi yophan ke mema ndena bana badumo sap man Paul. And also changing and reviewing the practice of democracy. Changing and reviewing the practice of democracy. As in, democracy, like I don't get
Sorry,
it.
Chief. Colleagues, let's just wait for him to wrap up.
Yeah.
Say gqibo, my brother, ne? As you make your closing remarks, my brother.
Okay.
Please.
Changing and reviewing the practice of democracy. Zangana understand how are we practicing ideology of the United States, and also which where have democratic practice they only have 2 parties, while Tina we have over 10. It's like looking at we're looking at third world problems from a first lens point of view in terms of sijonga ingxaki zethu from ngendlela yase America, their own work. In closing, Tom and Val. In closing, ingxaki yethu thina siku-stigma esinganangcono in terms of bazothina abantu. And also, hey man, if unthethe le yinto, we're gonna impact the future back. People on social media, they always attack character instead of my words. I may have flaws, but the character is definitely not flawed. That's my closing, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Enkosi facilitator ngale opportunity and uxolo ngoba nihlale phansi. I think my question is directed to I don't know if andingathi it's a question or it's a comment, but it's directed to speaker set soqala around the equal education. Umbuzo endizibuza wona is do we really have to talk or to speak about the equal education, or now eyona nto suppose basithetha ngayo is to transform the education as South Africa, because because it cannot be that abantwana like I think one of the speaker there you mentioned into zase rural areas. It can't be that abantwana coming from public school mostly. They are taught how to label low caste and all those useless things, instead of being taught about how to plant and also how to start your own business. So my question to you, Ms. Fatela, is do you think kubalulekile okanye kuyanyanzeleka uba education ase South Africa itshintshe, like the system, the way isetyenziswa ngakhona? And if indeed, do you think our government is willing to do that? Mandiphele apho. Tukule leadership ibigqiba ukuthetha no on social media leadership no kalikho domo.
Thank you for your remarks.
Thank you very much, Comrade Max and your panel, as I greet the house. I have notes here, quite a number of them. And in attempting to dissect the very fruitful engagements and presentations you have given us, let me first start by noting that South Africa is a highly depoliticized country. And South Africa is unfortunately a country without a national agenda. recently went to China as a deployment of SASCO on a cultural exchange program. When we landed in Shenzhen, we realized two things as a delegation. There is no one who's not doing anything in China. Everyone is busy. There's no one who says that I'll tell nje apha ekoneni nando kwenza. Komntu uzocela 2 rand, wonke umuntu busy. That's the first thing. There are no children who are loitering and playing the streets in China. In South Africa, ungene Soweto mnakaba ezwide uqobe yo izinja nabantwana endleleni. But I want to localize this as part of the national agenda thing that I spoke about. Before we can engage. How do we engage? Unabantwana abayi-4, una-21, otata babo ba different. Uzomamela kanjani? It's a question of context. We're in Imbadu, mosne.
Sure.
And I'm raising this.
Colleagues, let's allow him to get through his points.
I'm raising this because one of the things that makes South African youth not to be able to engage is that they are not properly guided. It is a question of foundation. It's a question of culture, question of heritage, and the lack of leadership to reshape how the country is going. Secondly, when you talk of realistic, I see these talks, I just said to Bundu, that perhaps they are a waste of time. I've been doing them for the past 7 years, since 2015. We come here, we talk about all of these things that are very fancy, but there is no impact that they are making. There are real people that we should be talking to, are the people that we don't go to. There are 2 worlds that we live in here at university, or the cultural shock that most people, when they arrive at university, and they ask, where is Kanadu? They are in the place where Kanadu put. Ipi Kanadu? Well, that is Zanadu, now Claude Cavan. We are divorced as a university from our society. The reason why we will come here away to, and you still see the same thing, you will talk here like a duck, we will come and swim. When you leave, we'll be dry. But let me ask a question because I'm perhaps old and I'm problematic. Do you think in a polarized society like ours, our constitution, our institutions are the ones that actually derail or postpone our true liberation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps while we're still framing our thoughts, I'll just give the speaker that posed the question to Uitu, ne? Uitu, my brother, not to Ms. Fatela. Perhaps she'll just respond to you.
Do I respond only to that one?
No, you're free to cut across all questions.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to go to the one that was clear and direct, which is the one about equal education and what we seek to do. I think it goes back to my question about the system, right? So when you're an activist navigating the current system, you cannot come and say, this is not working, let's change it, and you are an organization of just 9,000 learners in South Africa. So you do need to build allyship, right? Which is why we're now starting to organize parents, teachers, and everyone else. I do agree with you that the education system that we have now is not working, right? But in the current system, the tools that we have are submissions, changes in policy, and a bit of activism here and there. And so we are using those tools to their maximum, but unfortunately, there is no political will, as you've already said, to change things like on a drastic transformation, right? And I also think I've been working for equal education for the past 5 years now, and one of the things that I've seen in activists is that everyone experiences activism fatigue, right? And so that is why it's important that when we are activists, before we get tired, we must have small victories that move us forward. And that's why I got excited by that realistic in this engagement, because we need to have timelines on what we can achieve. I even say that sometimes when we say we can't achieve things, we must lay a foundation for the next generation to achieve them. I do think it's a big thing to say, let's dismantle the current education system, change the curriculum completely. It's amazing, we want to do that. But in the current status quo, you're going to get a call, you understand? So how do we then bring in attainable goals that are moving us forward in this system? I think what stood out for me, my brother, is this idea of, but this idea of he doesn't want to go out and vote, right? And I think it's an idea of a lot of young people in South Africa, and people equate it to apathy. I don't think it's necessarily saying, I don't care about politics. I'm a young person, very active. Every now and again, I do see young people with me, for political reasons, right? And if young people are engaged in that part, then it means there's something not working there by the ballot box, right? And so it does not equate to them not wanting to participate in any way on politics that move their country forward. But I think the crust and the core thing is, how do we create safe spaces within these engagements? And it's something that all speakers have spoken about, that engaging from who you are and like your own experiences. Because it does seem like at this point, our intersectionalities are not acknowledged in these engagements. And as such, some people don't feel safe and don't feel like their voices matter the same way that other people's voices matter. I was actually laughing at the example that my brother made, and I'm thinking, sometimes we want to engage on the hierarchy of, I'm head of province, so positionality. Right? You want to put positionality before ageism, and someone else wants to put ageism, and someone else wants to put their manhood in the indoda. So, and so how do we then find a balance in our intersectionalities and who we are to make sure that we get fruitful engagement? And how we do that is that we strip ourselves of everything and we remain with the humanity that we are, right? And we remain human. And that's our point of departure, as Ms. Fatjela has said. And then the last thing that I want to speak about is this idea that Oputi spoke about when he went to China and he found people busy, right? I think I've recently read a thesis that speaks about Umahlalela. I've just forgotten the name of the guy. He works for Umistra, he's a researcher there. And he wrote a thesis on who Umahlalela is and what Umahlalela does on a daily basis. And basically equating Uguti what is work, right? Because right now we're talking about which engagement is more important? The engagement where Itu is sitting on a white chair with students from NMMU, or the engagement that Itu is having on a taxi back home in the Ezwide, right? That person is not just sitting on a corner of the street. They're asking for someone for 2 rands. Strenuous work, I wouldn't do it. I would never, right? That person isn't just going around the streets. They're saying, even though your car has a camera, they're like, come, is that? So we need to decolonize indlela that we define work, and work that is valuable. Because even if I'm having 4 kids at 21 is work. So I think it's important that we never not think that people aren't working because they aren't doing what the people in China are doing, right? I think it's important that we decolonize how we think about work and what valuable work is. I also think that I like la analysis kaput because it's an analysis that I met with the konze wisile, and before I speak, I'm acknowledged as inkazana, ne? And if we are going to have meaningful conversations, already you have labeled and acknowledged, you have labeled and placed me somewhere in society. And so you've already turned down the volume on what my voice is because of socialization. And that is why that we cannot divorce engagements from conscientizing people, because consciousness speaks to transforming what you have been socialized as to something that is more transformative and something that is more inclusive, thus making these spaces more inclusive and more safe for everyone. So I must be able to speak ngondinkazana ebhongxileyo nabantwana bayi-4, right? And these are some of the things that we are actively fighting for. And that's why you will find us every now and again speaking about the practicalities of like organizing, moving ourselves forward, because there is no divorce to talking and there is no divorce to engaging and actually taking the work forward. And I want to challenge us, Maqabane, that xa sicinga sizame wethu ukucinga how we can think ngendlela that is intersectional, that acknowledges everyone that is part of the struggle. It shouldn't be a thing that we speak about in tables. It must be seen there. It must be acknowledged there. Senza njani xa umntwana abantwana bayi-4 but efuna uparticipate ku-strike, where do we take abantwana bakhe abayi-4 so that akwazi uparticipate? Ne? So it's important that we think about those things. How are comrades who are pregnant able to participate? Kwizinto ezifana nezi? How do I accommodate them? So that is what inclusivity and intersectionality speaks of. I think also I just wanted to add, random thought I had while I was sitting here is that we think of engagements as things to spark, right, how we act and move forward. But a lot of the times, we don't think of engagement as a way to monitor and evaluate what we have been doing, right? And I think that is something that is missing in the work that we're doing, that we talk, we go act, ne? And then the next time we talk is when we want to act again. We haven't been able to talk about what we have done before. So I do think that one of the ways that engagement will give us the quality that we'll need and it will move us forward is when we use it to monitor and to evaluate the things that we have done so that we're able to add onto what we want to do. Yeah, I do talk a lot.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I'm just going to give Tabo. Seems like, thank you very much. There aren't any questions for our online community. I'm really trying to follow up on the people that are posing questions on YouTube, but currently there aren't any. So we're just going to keep the conversation flowing amongst ourselves. For those who are joining us online, you're more than welcome to pose any questions, comments, clarities, opinions, and frame your ideas around the conversations that have been flowing across the floor. But I do want to invite you, my brother, to also add some of your 2 cents worth.
Oh, me? Thanks. No, thank you. It's the balance of the voice. I think, Keda, problematic, as usual. I want to, Kuman, always problematic. It starts by, and it goes back, the reason I'm starting by Kumani, because I went and I started with a social experiment, and I said, how many of you in a room full of men would be comfortable to speak if you're a woman? This is long before he has already problematized, rather, a 21-year-old with 4 children and different fathers. So he no longer sees a human, he sees a 21-year-old with 4 children and 4 different fathers. Don't see a human. 21-year-old, socially flawed, irreversible, in short. And I said, therein lies the problem. Because our conditions vary in this particular room. Vastly so. Somebody with money might see you different, lose bail is lalin. Somebody, I don't know, the examples are endless, but the point I'm trying to make here is the underlying preconceived notions, stereotypes, attitudes that we have prevailing, sustained in our minds, that we need to deconstruct. Because the moment when we start from that particular standpoint and remove all of these socializations, that is Petrarch speaking, to remove these socializations, then only then can we begin to have a meaningful conversation around it. So I'm laughing, but I'm just calling out politely. It's a way of engaging. No, it's correct. That's what I'm saying. It's a way of engaging. I start off by problematizing that, no, but there's nothing wrong with somebody. No matter, here's the thing, Twitter, social media. There's something going around, Batman, Soti, or something like that. Soti. Batman, Grotman, over leadership. To Grotman, understand? If I, just 3-4 days later, and I say, there's a similar social media, was that a Grotman now, or is that in the stereotypes? Do you get what I'm saying? So we need to debunk these particular stereotypes and how we understand being. I also want to disagree with the point that I don't know who raised. I don't know if it was the first speaker or someone at the back, that if I got the point correctly, that someone said South Africa is very depoliticized. It was your comment. I'd like to differ. In fact, if anything, South Africa is very politicized as a country. In fact, what divides us is our politics, not just party politics, our intra-politics and all of those who are divided by politics, because why? We live in a country that is very democratic. It allows for a plurality of thoughts, of ideas, and so forth. And I think for myself, therein lies a challenge. You know, somebody said, I want to make an example about 2015. 2015 is traumatizing to some of us. In fact, I had avoided speaking for 2 years now. It's my first comeback talking publicly because I don't like this conversation. Because 2015 was very traumatizing for many people. But when I recall around 2015, there's this conversation that keeps lingering in my head. Now I was convinced the issue is fees. Fees. Hey, fees must fall slambila, snamal, hey, two. Meanwhile, my colleague sitting next to me, hey, issue is me. Men, rape, ton. So which issue do you prioritize first? Because now as a black man, my issue is fees. Yeah, as a black woman, her issue is me, a black man, rape, patriarch, and ton. Now, in that moment, part of why fees must fall failed, I think, or is failing, whatever the case might be, we have different perspectives, is around how do we create hierarchy around particular issues. Yes, you can be intersectional around them, but the fact remains, society is very patriarchal. You know, 2015 was known to be issues of fees. According to, when you think 2015, you think fees. Don't think rape culture on campus. You think fees. So it's the hierarchy that we create, the hierarchy of worth that we assign to things that need to be challenged. But the example that is coming out of this for me is that as a polarized society, is it even, maybe it's a question I'm asking the House, is it even possible to find a common ground? Hey, the fighter upper, August in the waiting room, my fighter next to me, and I'm an ANC member, former EFF member. And I laugh because I always say to her, I said, the future is coalition. We're making the jokes like, future is coalition, because no what future is coalition. But I'm trying to think in my head, I'm like, if we're so divided as young people by party lines, you're complaining that you don't go to vote because political parties are selling you party agendas and so forth. But the politics, man, woman, person is by nature a political entity. You can't avoid. In fact, anyone who says I'm apolitical, even that is a political statement. No, I'm not. I'm apolitical. That is a political statement. Rooted in liberalism. I'm apolitical. So maybe what we should be asking ourselves is, does the system work? Does the current system work? If not, what is it that we're supposed to be doing about it? America doesn't have two political parties. America has a two-party system. You understand? So the issue is that their politics are just so divided, literally in half, that it renders everyone else useless. It doesn't matter. The Republicans might win this election. If they mess up, the next election, the Democrats will win. The Republicans, the Democrats. Whether they are rigging elections, we don't know. But that's just what happens in America. In South Africa, you have how many political parties? 200 and something political parties. But because our constitution allows for it, belongs to all who live in it, black and white. You understand? So maybe the issue is the system, a system overhaul, but the reality is we have inherited a colonial system. Our universities are colonial. The state, the idea of the state is colonial. Meaningful conversation, because you don't see me as a human being. You just see me as a person with 4 different baby daddies. We can't have a meaningful conversation. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll make my closing remarks at the end. We're going to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. but I just want to be able to open it up to the last few questions that we may have so that we may just be able to tie up the conversation and wrap it up. I'm trying to stay conscious of time. So in the interest of that time, I'll just note a few hands, comrades, if we have them. My brother, are you still wanting to come again? Okay, we've got one question here. We've got a brother there at the back. We've got another one here, there, and then there. I'll take those 5, no? Are we happy with that? Any more hands? We're wrapping it up. Okay, sure. Where's the mic going? I never noted that hand.
Thank you very much. Allow me to introduce myself or rename myself. My name is Tokoloram Dlali. Thoughts are thoughts as they are. It's an interesting conversation that the panel brought to our attention to realize that at least university is knowledge bound and knowledge inspires character and character translates to relation. So I just want to ask a question and say, what is the balance of professional politics and power invested in people? Thank you very much. To the panel at large.
Thank you very much, sir. Just repeat that question again.
I want to understand what is the balance of professional politics and people invest and power invested in people. Mostly, as people, we have the power, we have the free will. So what is the relationship between professional relationship of politics and us as people who are mandated to actually vote and make decisions within a society? I don't know if you get my question, but I try to attribute it. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Sorry, I want a 30 question.
Okay, sure. Colleagues, I think there's just a clarity here at the back so that we may be able to answer with some... Sorry, guys. There's just a clarity question to the gentleman at the back. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
sorry, it's just a clarity. By professional politics, what do you mean? I think I want to understand that part so that I'm able to capture the question properly. Can you just clarify?
I think it's just
mainstream.
institutions and stuff.
Okay,
Not
no,
in terms
got it.
of political politics. I think so.
For example, when I mean professional politics, Kwete says, fact check me, Kwete says, ni choncha yonke ni namapula choncha 2%. What's the professional of politics? What do we have to say as people? What do we have to say about Kwete making such statement? Because that is our money, it's our budget, but deliberately. So I want to understand the role of professional politics and us.
Okay, sure. Thank you. We have a question here, Sisi. Colleagues, please, just assist us for the next 10 minutes. We understand the excitement there at the back around that question, but let's all just work together and cooperate. Colleagues,
Good evening to wonke umntu olapha. I guess it's a comment more than a question. And I was reminded of it, particularly when we were talking about the relationship between engagement and conscientizing. I'm someone who, as a 21-year-old second-year Wits student, found herself disabled due to a car accident and consequently had to move from Johannesburg back home. And that's how I found myself in the Eastern Cape now, and that specifically then relates to the comment I wanted to make. And in there, having moved to Nelson Mandela University and studying as a disabled student with a caregiver who was usisi onga qibangi esikolweni. She comes to me, a blind student enters. I lived at post-grad university there. That's where disabled students with caregivers live. So a blind student comes to visit me, and when he leaves, and he comes at night and he leaves, and I make the comment of, I want to zagoduka njani, ehamba yedwa, does he know the campus really that well? She goes, "Hayibo akaboni?" And I'm like, yeah. Remember, she akagqibanga esikolweni. This is someone who grew up poor. And so in her, I'm like, yes, disabled students go to university. Ndimlo, ndihlala nawe nje mna. And then she says, but awukhubazekanga nje wena. And I say, what do you mean? She says, awukwazi uhamba. I'm like, Yima, what is the difference? And she says, ayibo Yandisa, usesikolweni, unemoto, uzawuphangela. What do you mean ukhubazekile? And in there then, because I had always been frustrated, specifically when dealing as a now disabled, who hasn't always been disabled, dealing specifically within the black community as a black person, where the large majority of us are poor. As now a disabled person, what disability meant to those people. And in my frustration of trying to engage and trying to conscientize so that you see that your way of thinking about disability is oppressive to me. I never saw that her very idea of disability was not the same as mine. To her, umuntu okhubazekileyo ngulamakhulu hleli endlini, ungakwazi nobheka edolophini, umane khutshwa agcakamele ilanga. Or ngulamntana who has never seen the gates of an education system because the community has already disregarded them as useless. That was disability. And so when us having then conversations and trying to engage and in trying to conscientize, it is also important for us to have, and going back to Ubuntu, the empathy to realize that sisonke sihleli apha, we are also in different ways victims of a system that violates us in those different ways. And so if I'm trying to have a conversation with you about disability, the important part and the also difficult part is for me to try and play, the first thing for me is to place myself in your shoes to say, kungoba ucinga le disability ndizama ukufundisa ngayo yintoni to begin with. That is the only way we then can meet in the middle to say, this is how we change the life of a disabled person. This is how we change our lives as black people, even though I'm someone who has never known poverty. Or I am a man who, at the very same time, violates you as a woman. The difficulty I think we're having in all the conversations we're having is we're too arrogant to place ourselves in each other's shoes. And that's what I just wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. I think we've got two more questions. One at the back, my brother. Noted you. We'll come to you and then we'll close off with the come on. Had a hand there. Yes, my brother.
Thank you.
We'll come back to the, sorry. We'll come back to the gentleman then with the black bucket hat in front of you. So when you're done, please pass the mic to him.
Okay. Good evening. I think all of the speakers here spoke of consciousness and the fact that most of us here, we are already the converted nation, I don't know. So I wanted to find out that me being from a rural area where there are a lot of young people that have a lot of potential and are aware of opportunities, but never really pursue them because of the environment and not being aware of the impact that pursuing, like coming to university, can have on their lives. What realistic and impactful advice can you give us that could help encourage other young people that are not a part of these conversations to, I don't know, look or, okay. Thabo, you mentioned that in order for us to address the problems we have now, we have to look at what we've been doing. High schools teach about career guidance and applying to universities, but there are still people who will pass with high marks and still stay at home and just, I don't want to say be complacent, but just be comfortable because they don't know better. Knowing that, what can we then do? Because there's already information out there, but people aren't pursuing it.
Thank you. Awesome, Kwabel.
Sanbona. I'm still bothered by one thing, Oishilo, my guy. The thing that pregnancy still defines women as a source of poverty and stuff. But I'll come back to you. Ne? The thing of being a guy, I should stand up. That guy answered some of my questions, being Funugwa answer to some of the people. There's no system that you're gonna do that to be implemented or being sourced from where we are as a change as a system of education where you are as a country. It means if you want to change the system, you need to change people. It means if you want to change people, you have to go to your roots. There is nothing that exists that can change people. Wrong understand that? If you want to change the system, you need to change people, and there's no way we can change people how they think. We're already being influenced by the roots and source of every capitalism. Malcolm X came, Julius Nyerere came, Mandela came, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. They did nothing. You understand? There is nothing. Ayikho into abayenzile. Ayikho. Like literally, ayikho into abayenzile. Ayikho into eyenzile yachenja ingqondo yo how humans were supposed to think. We're already being influenced by slavery and stuff. Already black people, our conscience feel inferior over white people. I wanted to answer your question, Guti. When black people are in Tingiti, I'm into a room full of white people. I won't feel comfortable. For one reason, I already feel inferior over them. Yabo? I already feel nothing. Even if I can have billions and stuff. You can be a billionaire, but if you stand up against people who actually made you feel inferior, you still feel inferior. Wabo, our consciousness will never change. The only thing we have to do is sit back, because if we go front, there is war. Wabo, there is war. There is war. There is nothing we can change as people. The education system, we still believe in the same system.
Sure.
And in order to change the system, you have to change people. Wabo, and we can't change people. You can still preach like Malcolm X. Abo Mahatma Gandhi bazile, no Gandhi wafa to create the one currency. They did nothing.
Sure, my brother.
Yabo so preach kakhulu. You die, and we are afraid. You die.
No, sure.
You die. Ugandu Zile wanted to create one currency and make Africa one. He died.
Let's
Understand?
let's wrap it up. Sure.
So yeah.
Thank you. Comrades, we just got 2 more questions. Let's tolerate each other.
Okay. No, sorry, man. Go ngabnambe kamlam ngabongile. Abongile mong. Isenemi yona ngisebenze kamama but ekatata ngisemachali. Childhood yami going up a cry dog. She's a great money pie, man. As I'm trying to wrap up everything and after I've listened to it, all comes back to one thing. Naleyo Mahatma Gandhi, Mandela, precision over speed. Bona bathethe gqitha out of emotion. Khange bacinge, khange baplote. And then you know, and once people get to a higher status, they disconnect from the real problems at large. And also, I couldn't finish this thing because it was time as my first thing. Yeah, but the main issue, as I see it, it is structuralism. Because umna can't call and so all but you know, I know how to figure kumchita was a Soweto, timcalele, but yenzalena lena le. Because our mindsets are not the same. But umna, I try by means of every day to practice ubondo. I greet everyone with a smile. Diazama, okokoko, and batelela bantu. Goes back to my second thing. I have my mistake and my flaws, but my characters will never be flawed. Okay. And also, there are a lot of hard workers in the world, but they've not succeeded. Abanye die poor. I'm a person that watches football a lot. And hard workers, bakona abanye that end up getting career-ending injuries. Then baphelele pa. And the analogy is that positioning is much more important than hard work. Put yourself in rooms that people will see that, okay, lo mdune timing, okay, lo masimsebenzisi. Don't run around, ukhule privilege, uye kwezwit and preach, uthethe ngetwang nge-English, kwa abantu bapha. Ayizophumelela la lonto.
Okay. Thanks, my brother. Yeah, we got the last one. It's just here. Jess? I think it's just, yeah. Tiani hijack Angela Mike. I'm going to say Pose your questions.
Oh, okay, gay. That's man asked you a question that said, if you have 4 kids in the age of 21, who do you think will engage you? Man, that's totally wrong, and I just felt offended. This is not about what you see outside, it's about what is inside. Someone who have 4 kids in the age of 21 have a possibility to change the world. So one thing I see is that most of the people, they shut their voices down because of their comments that they get from world. It's about what their comment they get from world because of their backgrounds, of their personality, of their looks, of their color. So most of the youth, they just feel insecure. And they don't talk or they don't show the world what they think or what they think that can change the world because they just feel insecure. So, you speakers, I just want to ask you that, what can you say to the youth that can change their insecurity, that can inspire them to voice their words out louder?
Okay. Thank you. No,
good evening, everyone. I'll be very brief.
Thank you. Colleagues, please, let's allow her.
I'm Ms. Mchake. I'm one of the raise managers. And I'm citing that because I'm seeing some of my students. You know, I don't want to take away from the panel, but I also want to correct something here. As I think one of the elders in the room, I've got my colleague here. Kudla ngotiwa, you've got to learn from other people's mistakes as cheaper. So we cannot sit here and justify Sibeteke the same way as our parents, and then city because you can still learn from that. Kumdano betekliyo, we're not going to write you off. But kongeka betek, there's no need to repeat history.
Yes.
And some of you are seated here as one of the first generation to come to a university. May that keep and sustain you to come what you came here for. The second part I want to say to the panel, some of you, or you cited here, and You were part of Fees Must Fall, and it was very traumatic. And I want you guys to keep celebrating. I love when you are introduced, kuchazwe your accolades, because it came at a cost. You must be unapologetic for being educated because it wasn't easy, so that our students can be motivated. Funny enough, I was saying to President earlier, we've got to inculcate la culture and strata up. We shouldn't become professional students. No one is indispensable. And cite, and it's good to say at your age, because those are things that our students must be motivated about. University you are here for 3 years or 4 years or whatever. Life will happen, but it doesn't have to be the fact that for you to be relevant, for years and years. There's one thing I want to plead as umzali in the room. You did what you did because that was relevant at that time. May we please employ different strategy and tactics and not destroy the very things when we've deconstructed, there'll be nothing to come back to, mdomnyama. Let us employ a different manner to engage. So that when they've done their part, at least when all has been said and done, the buildings are still standing, but not to take away to what happened then. And lastly, there's one thing I want to say as we're finding ourselves in the current dispensation and to bridge the gap. And I'll always come across as a stark record, Uguti, education is meant to change the way you do things. Indlela othetha, indlela of relating to other people. That's the difference between being educated and certificated. So that this can change. Nani on this side, you become the panel one day because nabo, they emulated other people. And lastly, what I do want to say, panel, I think you've alluded to it. You are the quality of the company that you keep. If when you are going to aim here, it's not about material things. The material things, and I can't do wrong, you must drive the cars and live in the houses because abazali bethu never got that opportunity. So let's not downplay being materialistic. The only thing we are saying is that that cannot be the end all and be all, being materialistic, but you must celebrate your success. So I don't want us to lose izindo. You are studying for a reason. It's coming at a cost. You must celebrate it, but do not forget that this and that came at a cost. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to the panel. I think I did a very good job in problematizing the discourse. Because when I arrived here, there were some comrades that could not be listened to because they're 15 years at university and they do not have a qualification. But when I listen to them, and when I reflect back, the contribution that they've made in my life is too huge to count as compared to those who just came here, took their degrees, and were swamped into the corporate world. So the stereotypes that you label people on are very important to point out. Because abanye abantu bana no tata nawe na una degree. No tata nawe no before. No tata nawe akubize ke izinto akubiza ngazo. So I was deliberate as an academic that I must problematize the discourse. It's not my conviction, but I must make sure that in a space like this, in Imbadu, we diversify the discourse. Coming back to the context, I think when we are speaking about engagement, particularly in a higher education space, because engagement is one of the pillars of a university, coupled with research, teaching and learning as well. And in my first point, I said, perhaps there is no clear-cut answer on how we can arrive at reimagining quality, realistic, and impactful engagement. But perhaps the best way to start is that before you enter in a discourse, you must do away with preconceptions. You must do away with stigma. You must do away with labels. At Anzo Tetanawa and Atwarel, ufunde LLP for 6 years. Mna LLP ndens 4 years. Therefore, we have no right in this discourse. Anzo Tetanawa and Kulila Machochombin, Mnan Kulen Stitches. As I learned, because I did intentionally try to stir the water so that the discourse would be fluid. When you enter into a conversation, Max, their purpose is to learn. The purpose is to unlearn. The purpose is to relearn. If you harbor none of the three intentions I mentioned above, do not enter into an engagement. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Hey, the mic took long to get to me, man. Oh, are we ever gonna arrive at the promised land? Hey, I'm wondering. My experience thus far has been intriguing. But nonetheless, let me get to the head of my standing up today tonight. Hey, I just admire and actually appreciate all the speakers that have spoken before me, all the intensity, all the opinions, all the emotions, all the drive that are within you. I think it's very crucial whenever we are having engagements because we are all different people, therefore, in the way we express, it's very crucial for us to having a fruitful engagement. Let me get to my question. I actually have a question, but the reason for my question is because I am a person who's more interested and actually understand things through literature a lot of times. And so when there's a lack of stories in our conversation, I get to be lost into what are we speaking about? How does this thing make sense in reality? So I just admire how some of the audience today have actually brought stories to say this is what I've experienced at a certain university in their speech. So I think it's Itumeleng speaking about a reading revolution that they sort of have. I'm not sure if it's some sort of initiative or what, but I would just love if you can actually share more on that, if it's about actually literature stories and retelling stories. And I also love if you can just share with us how much today in terms of how crucial is storytelling in reimagining and just our topic today. Thank you so much.
Molweni. Okay, no, ndinengxaki that's why ngakwazi uphakama. Okay, igama lam ndinguChulumanco Mchume Qashana. Umbuzo wam, I'll mix since abanye abantu cannot hear isiXhosa, yabo? So, umbuzo wam is that to the panelists, if it doesn't relate to what we were talking about, sorry. But you did mention something about the underlying systems, like the rules and all of that, right? So, since everything starts at home, and I will ask the question based on my university, like I'll make example in university leyam. We have the system of catering for students that are unfunded, right? Meaning, banikwa ukutya by a clinic, Now we have umntana that receives 1.5 from NSFAS. Automatically, xa ufala under NSFAS, it means upua. La 1.5 mhlambi, it happens that send kokwabo to deal with ezinye izinto zakokwabo. Now akanakutya eres. I-system eplacewe institution ithi pha eclinic kuya abantwana abatheni aba unfunded. Yena xa ivela uvela yezo umntana otheni o-funded akafumani kutya. So it means uzoyaphi. So umbuzo kwam kuni as a panelist is that how do we engage in such challenges? How do we tackle as the underlying systems without being seen as abantu radical? Because when we strike, we don't. Sibeke labels, basingamagqubusha, sitheni, and nothing happens. Kuthiwa masi engage, we should sit, not din. Sorry about din if nikon. So we should sit and do whatever. And when we engage with them, kuthethwa by our SRC members and all of that, still nothing changes. So how do we go about in championing such systems? Yeah.
Ngoska Kulusis, I believe that was our last question from the floor. Thank you so much for all your contributions, questions, comments, and clarities. We've noted about 4 questions that came up. Most to all were comments, stirring the pot and also just inspiring us. So thank you so much for your contributions. I'll leave it over to the panel to wrap it up, then I'll also make my closing remarks. Guys, it's yours.
Thank you guys very much for the questions. Now, I just want to answer, I think, the simplest question that was asked, simply because Ingqondo is shutting down now. Somebody asked how we can motivate or inspire young people. I liked that question, and perhaps I liked that question because I'm a parent. I don't know how young or how old you may assume I am, but I'm a parent too. My firstborn is a teenager. So that's just a hint. You know, I think I believe the way to inspire young people is to be truthful. Do you guys mind if I stand? I just want to see you when I speak. Is to be truthful. I believe, you know, sometimes as abantu abamnyama, we like to present ourselves as a finished product. So you see me in the house wearing maxhosa, driving the car. And often even when we post on social media, we just post about the achievement and we celebrate and we don't talk about the struggles. And when you look at me, you already have preconceived notions about what my life must be like, where I might have grown up, the kind of school I might have gone to. So it is very important, I believe, that when we speak to young people, we must be very truthful. So that you know, I may have it together now, but I haven't always had it together. And that's okay. We must be very truthful. I was a very problematic child. Big time. In fact, I don't know how I didn't fall pregnant in my teens, but I didn't. By the grace of God, nina restorate. But I didn't, you know. I matriculated a very long time ago, and I didn't immediately go to school, right? So you may see me, you may hear the way I speak, nobalowa matriculator, wa varsity, wa graduator, right? I didn't immediately go to school. I went to varsity when I was 29. First year. It's a pity there's someone here that I was in class with, or I turned to get a class in. I remember there was a student who once said, who was quoting me, as Awethu has said, as Usis Awethu has said, yabo, ati ukama, hey, I was Sisi long makas, dala lomdu. But in that setting, I never expected anyone in my class to call me Sisi. Because I wasn't there as Usisi. I wasn't there as Umama Kafarai. I was there as a student. Senzi assignment sonke. Siwa sivuka sonke. You know? So I went to varsity at 29. And there's a young man I was telling this story to. Dimbuzi ndoba, kutheni ungayi esikolweni, wathi sisi ndimdala. That yo noba mna ndisisinyanya. I went to varsity at 29. If you go to my Twitter page, you'll see andifihli futhi londo leyo. I'm not ashamed of it. And just because you start late, just by the way, because bakhona abantu who will go to a high school, mndaye varsity, a graduate, aphangele, and izinto zakhe zihambe ngendlela, so to speak. And for some of us, we are going to take detours. Yebo, kesiyofrika, simithe, sithini, siwe, sihuzuke, siphinde sivuke, and we continue. But as it was expressed, just because we don't need to repeat the same mistakes, right? Some are mistakes, some are life lessons, but you don't write off. So it's very important, I feel, that as abantu, when we stand here, to share our stories. Mna ifana nendoba, umntu who will, for example, sometimes maybe I'll park my car, and there'll be a young person who says, yo, sisi, yo. Yabo. Don't, whatever. Now it would be easy to be like, choo, and just walk. I don't do that. I will give that child the time of day because I needed that. I have become the person that I needed when I was young. I will give that person the time of day. Uyayithanda. Yo, ndiyayithanda sister. You're my dream. Nami ngenye imini ndifuna uqhuba le trance. Did you okay? Ndimbalisa lithi yo. You know, and I will engage him or her so that they see There's a backstory to the success. There's a backstory, there's sacrifice. So mna, I think it's very important, even when you talk about insecurities. You know, the biggest insecurity I think that we have as abantwana bamnyama, as abantu bamnyama, even standing up in that room full of white men, is because we think the benchmark intelligence is lungu. Fune nikwazi uthetha isingesi nikhumshe niquze kuze nibone ba ya. Kanti to be able to stand and articulate if yourself ngolwimi lakho wenu. To be able to simplify a concept, you know, if you really think you're smart, explain something to a 2-year-old. Explain something to umdomdala. Explain something to umntu ongenasikolo. Explain the concept of disability to umntu whose concept or notion of ukukhubazeka is completely different. Explain intersectionality against the concept yebuhlantism. We simplify, we take ngesixhosa umuntu ayive ayiqonde naye ba oh yiyo le. Then you know. So insecurities zethu, for me, I feel they are, it's the external noise. It's because we look at abantu and assume, but they've got it all together, they've got it figured out, they are successful, they are whatever, no. And I'm a prime example of that. And I'm not ashamed of that. And you know, some people get a head start, ne? Kukho abantu that get a head start, I graduated kuqala, I gqibe LLB in 4 years, aphangele kuqala. When usazama ufunde first year ukuyeke because awona NSFAS uphinde uzame uphinde uyophangela uphinde ubuye. That was my story, right? There are people who had a head start, and I'm not going to make material comparisons, but sometimes you understand in material comparisons. There are people who got a head start in life, and singapaka apha ngoku imoto zethu. Mna ngoku lo ubuyele esikoleni at 29 yena kudala ephangela. That's the truth. So never write yourself off. As long as you as long as you've got air in your lungs, it's okay. If you mess up, it's fine. It's fine. Because now. And let's be honest. Share your story. Don't be that person who finish products with social media. Don't be that person who finish products for social media. Tell your story, own it. Own it. Nobody can use it against you. Own it. And so what? And so what?
Thank you. Do you want to wrap it up? Bonso Pendle? Go for it. Tabo, you can go for it. Tabo.
Oh, thanks. I think, yeah, no. I will keep it short as well because it is getting quite late for some of you. Like my colleague, I'm inspired by the question of Sisi about how can we inspire our colleagues back at home to think differently. It's almost like we exchange notes because when the funusukuma but ngoku the shyness because I was hanging namkopa because this is the only time ANC and EFF. Yeah, okay. The future is coalition, colleagues. But for me, there's a quote. Unfortunately, I like to operate with quotes, not because I believe firmly in them, but I think it's a good starting point to guide our thoughts, right? And it starts by saying the shortest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct it to hold in higher esteem those who think alike as opposed to those who think differently. And the reason I'm saying this is because as young people, we need to dare to be different. As fun as about, find your niche. What is it that you excel in as an individual? Explore that idea, that possibility, and then harness it. Work. Sometimes it's not easy. It's not easy, guys. We're sitting here, we're deputy directors. No one says, it took me 3.5 years to finish my master's. I've failed in many people's eyes. 3.5 masters is 2 years. Hey, guys, submit a tabo. But you push. you push, some nights are better than others, some nights you go get drunk, it's the truth, because there's nothing else you can do. But you come back and you remind yourself why you're here. You're not here to be a career student, President. You are famous today, you're famous only last year, a year or two. If you are famous beyond that, you've overstayed your welcome. I don't expect anyone at campus, University of Pretoria, to greet me. You shouldn't know me. Now I'm doing my PhD, I'm old. You shouldn't know me as a first year student. You shouldn't say Tabo. Hey, comrade Tabo, comrade. It means you've been here for too long. For too long. So let us get in the system and live. But in the same breath, let us not shun those who take longer to exit the system. Let us not shun student activists. I'm a former student activist. You don't know the sacrifices, personal, emotional, physical, financial, that it takes on me just to make sure that you have food tomorrow. So of course I'm going to fail. Of course I'm going to tire. Of course I'm going to become weary. But it's to remind myself, why am I here in the first place, and to never give up. I think one of the things I'm very proud of, Nakem Nashem, was my master's. I don't know how many times I contemplated giving up, dropping out. Yeah, okay, guys, I have 2 degrees already. What's the point? You understand? But I pushed because it's tough out there. What can you do with an honors in this day and age? It's very tough out there. So you need to push, try to stand out. You understand? So it took me 3.5 years. In the end, I still did Reimagining because I got 73% for my master's. I took 4 years to do it, but I still got 73% for my master's. So I qualify for a PhD as opposed to those who finished on record time. So push. Remind yourself why you're here. Our journeys are different. But in the end, it's just the reality. So I think in closing, it's the last quote, last quote. It reads, I don't know these authors, so I can be accused of plagiarism. You never know. But I say it's a quote. The illiterate of the future are not those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think as young people, ours is to constantly learn, unlearn, relearn. There's no such thing. I know the context in which you said it, but I'm saying, learn, unlearn, relearn, humanness. Thank you very much.
It feels so weird to now be going back to the questions that were technical after that motivation, but I guess I'm the woman to do it. I really just want to entertain that question because I do think when we have these conversations, we are always somewhat abstract, right? And not speaking to the practical things. And so that's why I want to entertain that question about the reading revolution. So basically, a reading revolution is not something that has started yet. It's a campaign that we are working on. It was launched just last month. But what we are trying to do is using reading as the first step of conscientizing people. And the reason I mentioned it is because if you are then going to engage in a way that provides quality, you need people who are informed, who have access to information, and who are motivated to go access that information. And so storytelling is a big part of reading. And I know when we talk about reading, a lot of people think about taking a book and actually reading it. But if we're then coming back towards ourselves, you'll then understand that passing on knowledge was done through storytelling in the African home. And so we can never disregard storytelling. This is something that Nalibali is trying to do vastly in our radio stations, where you just, in the middle of a show, you get someone reading out a story. I used to think it's random, but I like it anyway. So I think that is that. But as my closing remarks, I don't want to be very motivational. I'm not. I want to say, comrades, let us organize ourselves ngendlela that is kind and that acknowledges our humanity. Because as I said, that we are sitting here very, very tired because the work of activism sometimes is not very fashionable. Sometimes it catches fatigue because there's no instant results. And so we need to desperately, at this point, find spaces where we acquire knowledge, but not just acquire knowledge, take knowledge to the people that need it the most. Someone was saying these engagements are a waste of time. Comrades, they're not a waste of time if you learn from it today and tomorrow you take it to someone else who was at res when we're doing it, right? So I think we need to learn that the responsibility of transforming our engagements, our universities and our country doesn't just rest with the generals at the forefront of the strike, it rests with the rest of us, right? We need to be able to conscientize the people that we find in our immediate circles. And I think we need to find ways to organize them towards actions that will transform where we are as a country. And that is the only way we move forward. People's power is, we need to realize that people have more power than the system itself, and that power can only be ignited if we talk to each other about information and stop using information to create hierarchies. We must talk to each other, build consciousness, organize each other, and do it in a kind way that acknowledges that sinenyama negazi. Enkosini.
Thank you very much to our speakers. It's been a fruitful engagement. I think there will be someone who will make vote of thanks, so anibuleli mntu. But even to the crowd at large, you guys really brought credible content, questions, and opinions. You know, this is a very relatable and respectable space, so thank you very much for all your contributions. And we spoke extensively about engagements, we spoke about institutions, but at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people try and speak about the notion of how universities are a microcosm of society. And at the end of the day, these engagements are a reflection of a value exchange that we need to have as human beings amongst each other. For us to be able to impart certain knowledge and skill and value so that in the process of the exchange, we are able to equip one another. We are able to educate one another. And at the end of the day, if we're not getting it right, there's a colleague that said in the previous Imbadu, quoted a quote that said, "I can never be a pessimist because I'm still alive." You know, you always need to remain optimistic about the spaces of engagement that you tap into and the things that you say and how they can add value to the next person. So we need to constantly be conscious of the contribution that we are sharing at each other. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to grow. I mean, from the point of institutions and constitutions, I mean, we're living in a system whereby we understand the flaws that they have. You know, as South Africa, we are introduced, or rather, I studied in a basic education that had an OBE system that failed in 5 first world countries, but was introduced in South Africa. What was that setting me up for? You know, as a first world aspirational country, what was it setting me up for? But at the end of the day, with that level of education, it was able to equip me with the tools of analysis for me to cope at university. And therefore, in spaces of this nature, I then gained further abilities, skills, knowledge, and knowledge transfer for me to be able to frame a wider thought and interaction within society. So we need to constantly seek and crave spaces like these. We need to constantly try and become optimistic towards the outcomes that we can produce in spaces like these. And if we're not getting them right, at least we're able to exchange some kind of value until these spaces produce the end product that we aspire to achieve in society. Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Bundunyaka. Giorgio, please come and make your closing remarks, Puti.
Thanks, Max. It's Nyak, not Nyak. Sorry to be wrong. Mine is very small, but yet significant. Tabo, I'm going to steal this thing of yours of quotes and say there's a book by the Vice Chancellor of UJ, Professor Chilidzi Mahwala, sorry for butchering him. He says that the call for a new type of African leader, that's the name of the book, he writes that, it's become apparent to me that due to the complexities of the problem that face humanity today, those who do not know should not lead, close quote. With that being said, I think it's important then to summarize the discussion that it's important that we stick to the notion of learning, unlearning, and relearning. With that being said, mine is to thank Firstly, the panelists and the facilitator. I will call shortly Atengosi Pangushe and Ayanda to come and hand over a token of appreciation to the panelists. With Wazir coming up, I want to thank and recognize there's a lot of people in the background. We've set numerous meetings, sometimes during the middle of the night, sometimes during the day. And I want to thank, I should have acknowledged them earlier on, res managers, that without your help and your assistance, none of this would have been possible. With the same breath, I want to thank res leadership, your prims, your primarias, who have helped us through all these Imbadus, and because it's in the notion of student governance and, student life and development, that we're trying to reimagine the issue of engagement within university in trying to be an African university. So this is part of the project. So the Imbadu centers itself with being a helping hand in that. And then I want to thank you guys, the students, and the broader community for coming up and staying up this late. You know, I was worried earlier on, Ayanda will tell you that I kept on sending messages and saying, are we going to meet this target that we've set? And truly and indeed, I was told to relax, but I'm not a relaxed person, I'm very on point. So I'm a person that I must know everything that's happening so that I can relax at that point. But it's been proven to me that trust must be given and that students are really thirsting for engagement. And this has proven that. So with that being said, please look in your program. There'll be other Imbadus that are going around, and I'm seeing familiar phrases that go around. So please continue to support. And hopefully you get to learn a lot. And also one day you'll be you'll be seated here and be able to share within what you know. It's a very strenuous process to get the right people at the right time. Others want flights changed last minute. Tabo, I'm not going to mention names. Others want so many things. But with that being said, as it was said, these Imbadus are not only going to stay within the vicinity of the university. Our vision is to go into the townships, into the broader community outside, and to have discussions that are building, because what we're trying to build here, we're trying to build an institute. We want Nelson Mandela University to be known as a space where we represent the values and the being of Utata and Nelson Mandela. So with that being said, I'm not sure whether my colleagues have disappeared on me, because I don't want them to seem like Bana Ndim, Madibaz Youth Lab. It is a lot of people in the background. And also thanks to my colleagues as well. So I think I'm going to first on to call Tabo to just come up and take, okay, they're still coming. Ayanda, you want to say one or two things?
Yeah, no, the gifts are coming.
Okay.
Yes. So, thank you so much, Buntu. I think Sizkile guys gifts. All right, Masiye, bra. Ipitumia. Ay. Bega yawan makawan. Ah, yim.
Oh, I'm supposed to pose it.
Angane. Hey, there's someone. Kakhulu kubeka yawan, bra. Kancane sizophumelela.
Awethu, can you please come up? Awethu. Noma come.
Ujesu uyazazi.
Which one is for which one? Okay.
Awethu lena.
Because there's one missing here, I think.
Kancane.
For the facilitator, what did you get? Yeah.
All right, and then Itu.
Vex, please come. You will notice that you might have made a bit of a mix-up, but amongst yourselves, you can sort it out. And then, just before I give to Ayanda quickly, can the panelists and the facilitator, the res managers, as well as the Imbadu team, just quickly come up, and we're going to take a picture. We'll organize that now. And then Ayanda, I think you can take care of the rest. Thanks.
All right. So, team, mine is very short. So I hear people were saying that they were very stressed because they didn't know what the turnaround is going to be. But mnabendiyaz, abantu bama going to show up. And you guys did just that. So I think for me, ngoku, ndifuna nje uniqhobela izandla, guys. Thank you so much. Can you please give yourselves a round of applause? And thank you for proving the world wrong all the time and coming up. If bakhona apa okhadebe ompondo ochawe manflate man guys nobani ngobani odlamini ngobani abanye abakhoyo obhele ngobani abakhoyo ompemvu omchenge omngqongo amamfene hey ndiphanse ndalibala omadiba ochezi Alala bethu nine. Enkosini kakhulu ngokuba lapha. Please make sure that next time if you do have other ideas and themes that we could be discussing in these platforms, please contact myself or the team that you're seeing here. And also one important thing, I want us to also start a culture of moving away from just simply talking, but actioning. Ndifuna siteshongene ezilalini. So if with that mentality, if we work together, I'm definitely sure that something positive will come out. So guys, as promised, at the back, your situation is brewing there. Ndiphekile bethu namsuku bonke andilali bendinicinga. So please enjoy and thank you so much for always being kind, loving and caring and engaging in these spaces. Ndicela kujo lokugqibela bahlali. AP bra. Uphi? Lwandile AP. Nanso yami ke. Bendifuna leyo. Ayikho enye imic na?